Okay, so I wanted to do this video on this bill 1867 and this historical time that we live in, which is really looking like we are moving into a dictatorship. Now, the suggestion is always, it's been evolving over time. There has been the suggestion that we would be moving into this dictatorship or this Nazi style, fascist style of dictatorship, and it's going to be global. And there's been suggestion about this, but now it's actually coming to fruition. So over the past 3 weeks, I've kind of been watching and waiting just to see what is going to be happening. And as I'm noticing, things are intensifying. And so I think it's only necessary to do these videos to cover very specific areas, because honestly, I believe that a lot of what's happening here is utter nonsense. It's just insanity. And so I just really, my role is really to help people to move into the heart and engage the technology of the heart. But on the other hand, I understand and know that it's so important for us to understand the situation or the circumstances that we find ourselves in. So bear with me here, but for those who have the eyes to see what is really going on here, are really going to have an easier time with the intensification of what's happening on the world stage. Now, the power control force, now they have their own power, okay, each and every one of them, but they also want your power and they want my power. Okay, and so that's what we're really dealing with here. It's all about power control force. So the power control force, again, they have possession of their own power, but they can't force you or me to give our power to them. They can't force us, because that power is locked within each and every one of us, you see. Everything that we're seeing right now is about controlling our humanity's power and gathering as much of it so that they can continue to have or build this illusory system that they have. And they're trying to uphold this. It's a lie. It's an utter lie. This whole system is a lie. And people really, really need to get to the real nitty-gritty and understanding of that. And so for those of you who have eyes to see through the deception and really come to understand that the nature of your existence is that you are divine wisdom. There is a wisdom within you. It's locked within you, and you are awakening to that. And the power control force is trying to stop that from happening. And so you have a technology. There's a technology within your heart, okay? And what you need to do is to come to know the technology of the heart. That's the subconscious, and integrate that with the mind. Don't just use the mind. Use the technology of the heart and come to know what your divine purpose is, and live out your divine purpose. Yes, it's easy for me to explain stuff about what's going on in the news, but that's really, and what's going on in this world and how we're being deceived. And, the whole game here is that you're not to react or retaliate, because that's what the power control force wants you to do. They want you to react. They want you to stay in this utter sense of fear and chaos. Because when you are in fear and chaos, they can control you. You have no sense of, you're willing to give up your freedoms more if you are fearful. They know this, okay? They know how your mind works. They know how the biological vehicle of the physical human being operates. And so these guys, these psychopaths, they sit around tables, okay? And they have developed this plan to dismantle this system. Now, this is by design. So you have to come to understand. You have to have the eyes to see that this physical world system was built for the purposes of being dismantled. You have to come to understand and know the truth of this. Okay? So I'm going to talk to you about a few articles that I'm going to post, but very interesting thing came up. EU fulfills Hitler's dream of dictatorship. All right, here's a suggestion. Hitler's dream of dictatorship. Yes. So what happened during the Nazi regime, in the Holocaust, during the concentration camps, that was a prototype for what's to come in United States and around the world. But United States will be the focal point. So what we're seeing is that individual countries, if they want to retain their sovereignty, this is what's happening in the EU. If they're going to retain their sovereignty, then they are going to have to go back to their original currencies. So we're seeing what's happening with this debt crisis, right, in the European zone. What we are discovering here is a playing out of a plot. Yes, these psychopaths sit around a table and they've devised a plot that's playing out on so many different levels. Okay? And the plot that's going on has been going on for at least 50 years across Europe, and which is in order to bring in political union control from the center of the under democratic fashion. This is a kind of European dictatorship, but not only European, it's worldwide. So if Hitler were still alive today, I'm sure he would be smirking and smiling now, saying, this looks rather good. This is a Euro dictatorship, the kind of thing he would have dreamed of. Exactly. Hitler's rise to power. I wanted to focus a little bit on that because that is really what's playing out here with Obama, right? Hitler rose to a place of prominence in the early years of his party. Being one of the best speakers of the party, he was aided in part by his willingness to use violence. Yes, what we're seeing is violence. We're seeing our military out in this, our military police out in these military type of guard doing things like this, spraying peaceful protesters with pepper spray. This is becoming, we're becoming socialized into this type of dynamic in our streets, where there is this control of the police force using all kinds of very harsh tactics, brutal tactics, in order to expose or to dehumanize the human species. This is what we're starting to see more and more of. And so violence is very advancing very, very quickly here. And so with Hitler, his political objectives were to recruit party members who were willing to do the same, commit violence, yes. And so the U.S. government and governments around the world are recruiting police to do their dirty work. Hitler's rise after the Reichstag adopted the Enabling Act of 1933. Reichstag was the burning of a parliamentary building in Germany. And Hitler, they did a thing called, like control opposition, and said it was the Communist Party that did that. And it wasn't. It was a psyops by the power control force. But because of that burning of this building, a parliamentary building, there was an act, Enabling Act of 1933, which enabled Hitler to assume dictatorial power, which gave Hitler a base from which to carry out the first steps of his National Socialist Revolution. And so this Enabling Act, when used ruthlessly and with authority, virtually assured Hitler could thereafter constitutionally exercise dictatorial power without legal operation. Okay, so where I'm going with this is that the power control force is trying to implement legislation, and they're doing that through this Senate Bill 1867, also known as the National Defense Authorization Act, to create global war on freedom. They're creating a Nazi system, a dictatorship. The Nazi system in the 1930s, through Hitler, was a functional model. They're using that model now to go to use in the United States. And now with this Senate bill that was just passed, also known as the National Defense Authorization Act, there are two sections in that bill, 1031 and 1032 of this bill, that are completely unrelated to the funding of the military, which is what this National Defense Authorization Act. They just slipped two sections in this bill that really give them the authority to detain anyone. Anyone who who the U.S. government deems they want to detain, such as Occupy Wall Street protesters and talk show hosts, bloggers, journalists, anyone who holds a so-called anti-government point of view. This is the open and blatant declaration of war against anyone is not going to go along with their plans. And it's basically a takeover of nations. And they can arrest secretly and torture American citizens and other acts of outright tyranny waged out by out of control. They're an out of control government. And the fact that this bill was actually passed is incredible. You can see that the Congress have been bought and they've sold out, probably because they know what's coming, and they've been sold that they will be protected. They won't have to be scrutinized like the rest of the human species. That's an eye-opener for these people. So for those of you who have been burying your heads in the sand on the coming police state, need to wake up and face the music. The U.S. senators would knowingly and willfully attempt to pass a bill that legalizes indefinite detainment, torture, and killing of American citizens with no due process whatsoever on American soil. This is scary. It's nothing less than a traitorous betrayal of one free American people. Now, this Constitution, the Constitution of the United States, again, was put in by the Power Control Force. So it's a perception that you are free through this Constitution. So a lot of people are going back to the Constitution and says the Constitution says that we have a freedom of speech, all these different freedoms that we have, and yet it's really not freedom. It's freedom within this system, but really the Constitution was developed by the Power Control Force, so they know that, and they're using it to take away your freedoms, to refine your freedoms. But again, if you're going by the Constitution, it was developed by the Power Control Force. They knew that you were going to use that as a means or a measure to determine how this dictatorship is transpiring or coming about, and want to go back to this Constitution as a way to say that the United States government is not holding up the Constitution. Well, the Constitution is bogus anyway, so I wouldn't worry so much about it. Worry more about doing the inner deeper work, coming to know your nature of your existence, coming to understand the deception program. Remember, this Constitution was developed by the Power Control Force, the first fathers or the forefathers of the United States. So, don't get deceived by this Constitution. It's a perception that you are free. The Constitution holds a perception that you're free, and you're not. So I want to talk about this Occupy Wall Street. American police to serve and protect the 1%. Really, that's what they're doing. And the ongoing anti-greed Occupy protests have seen too many instances of police using brutal tactics against demonstrators. Yes, brutal tactics against demonstrators. Some say the U.S. is militarizing its police force and squashing the very freedom it's so keen to preach internationally. Yes, there are definitely double standards. Today's breed of law enforcers are dressed in riot gear and armed with heavy weaponry. Yes, body armor, flashbangs, tear gas, and potentially lethal projectiles. As tens of thousands of Americans assemble, cops have been accused of creating confrontation, not diffusing it. Some veterans of the force can't help but resent the situation, which is wonderful they're coming forward. And here's a quote: "It's a travesty of democracy, the way the police are totally suppressing the people's right to assemble and to protest." Well, it's all by design, people. I told you, don't go out there. Do not go out and protest in the Occupy Wall Street movement. It's a Venus flytrap. They want you to resist and retaliate so they can implement martial law. They can implement more laws and more legislation so that they can take away your rights based on the Constitution. Now, I had to look up 1867 because I knew that 1867 had something very interesting to show us, to reveal to us. In 1867, so here's one thing that stood out for me. In 1867, the British North American Act receives royal assent, forming the Dominion of Canada, and in an event as a confederation. This unites the province of Canada, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. Ottawa becomes the capital, and yeah, so I thought that was quite interesting, especially when we heard on Wednesday of this week that the new border deal of Canada and the U.S. So although this North American Act, the National Defense Authorization Act, really has a lot to do with the integration of North America, United States, Canada, and Mexico. And so this new border deal just came through with the U.S. and Canada. Two sections deal with easing trade and increasing security. So that's what this is coming a week after the other act that takes away the freedoms in the United States. So I found that quite interesting. The results of those talks of the two-part action plan that maps out efforts to harmonize regulations across the spectrum of trade goods while increasing the amount of information shared between the two countries in both legitimate and suspect travelers. Where the ideal of a more open border gets a bit sticky is when it runs into the elephant and mouse problem of Canada-U.S. relations. Establishing a common set of criteria for determining who is or who is not a security threat will mean adopting American standards, period. Yes. So they're going to have the same things going across the borders here. So this will definitely be, for Canadians, a privacy concern. For Americans as well. But privacy concerns lessen the value of border pass. Setting up criteria to determine who is a security threat will likely mean adopting U.S. standards. Among the highlights of the new plan, an entry-exit system will be established, which both countries share information when their citizens cross the border. There you go. Each country will obtain more information, including biometric data from people in foreign nations seeking to come to the U.S. and Canada. I'll put the link to that article below so you can read it. But here's where we're moving into. It's a deception program. And so what we are experiencing here is an intensification of what is to come. And that is this dictatorship. And so when we see movies like Immortal and Limitless, these are movies that have been coming out, and Knowing. You see, the power control force knows that humanity is waking up. And so they're using their deception plan to keep you in an utter state of fear so that you do not see through the deception. Come to know your existence as divine wisdom and learn the technology of the heart so that you can transcend this nonsense, this utter nonsense. So I hope this was of value to you. I thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. Try to pass these videos around and subscribe to the channel. And remember to stay in the heart, because really that's what this is about. I'm about supporting people to stay in the heart. You need some tools, and learning the heart technology, detaching from this system, from the matrix, is really going to be what helps us through this change and transformation. I wish you all the best. Thanks for tuning in. Leave me any questions or comments. Let me know what you think. Talk to you soon. Bye.